I'm Chris Farrell from the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, a wacky weekend morning show, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out right now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Thank you for listening to the Intellectual Podcast. I'm your host, David S. Dawson, and I welcome you to Season 8 of our show. The Intellectual Podcast is available on all the major podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Please make sure to tap that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the show. We're also on social media, so give us a like on Instagram or a retweet on Twitter. We are at The Intellectual on both platforms. You can also follow us on Facebook. Just look for Intellectual Entertainment. And subscribe to our YouTube channel and get notifications of our video podcasts and other fun content at youtube.com/intellectual entertainment. We've also joined the fun on Clubhouse. Join us for continuing discussions with our guests and fun rooms talking about the entertainment industry and the latest hot topics in pop culture. Just join the Intellectual Chats Club on Clubhouse. We've even made it easy to find. Visit intellectualchats.club on any web browser to be taken to our club so you can join up. Now, let's get on with the podcast.
Talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. The Intellectual Podcast starts now.
Welcome to the Intellectual Podcast. I'm David S. Dawson. My co-host, Whitney Wegman-Wood. Hi, Whitney.
Hello, everybody.
Who's our guest today, Whit?
Today we have Barri Evins. She is a screenwriter, producer, lady of many hats, and also I found out a once upon a time clown, but we'll talk about that in a minute. How are you doing, Barri?
I was great, but I don't know that I agreed to talk about the clowning, but my little brother will be thrilled.
We don't have to talk about it, but that's one of the things that Barri and I bonded over as being goofy people.
Whitney always gets excited when she meets a fellow clown.
I'm open, but I was like, whoa, wait.
So, Barri, I guess to start out, because I always like to start out with someone's journey, right? Because we hear about all of these hugely successful people. And I know for me, sometimes I look at it and I'm like, wow, that's so intimidating and daunting. How did they get there? So where did you grow up? Where did you start from?
I grew up in Clearwater, Florida.
Oh.
And as lovely as it is and beautiful, and the first time I ever got to drive a car after I got my license, went straight down to the beach, and as beautiful as it is and as fabulous as the Gulf of Mexico is as a body of water, it was boring. And especially then, and there was just not a lot in the way of culture in my interests. And maybe that was actually a good thing. Because as a result, here's what happened. As soon as I was able, I started spending summers away. And I spent one summer studying theater abroad. I spent the most of my amount of time in London. Do you know what I mean? Right, yes, okay. And hanging in pubs with Englishmen who really were into American teens, and the rest traveling the continent and seeing theater performance from Aida at the Baz at Carcaya to the Marionette Show in Salzburg. And I met Henry Fonda and Jimmy Stewart, who were both playing in London at the time. One Henry Fonda and Clarence Darrow, and Jimmy Stewart and Harvey. And because we were, we were told, you send a little note backstage before the performance. And especially because you're Americans, you have a chance to come back and meet them. Well, I mean, Jimmy Stewart was lovely and let a slew of us into his dressing room, and it was filled with stuffed rabbits. And I was jonesing to meet Henry Fonda. I had actually been a huge Clarence Darrow fan, like written my 3rd grade book report on Clarence Darrow. And here he is playing Darrow in the David Rentell's play. And I was a fan of old movies like, what is it? Any Wednesday? Oh, I'm getting it slightly wrong. Any Given Wednesday? Anyhow, a fan of his early work. And I wound, when the tour came with a lot of fabulous tickets. I mean, we saw Jean Genet, and we saw, Pinter, and we saw, just this huge scope. And I was a theater, performing arts summer camp person. So, but that was not one of the tickets. And I was like, oh, I have to go see that. And I wound up not grabbing tickets right away and going by myself instead of the people in the group. And here I am trying to find the theater off of Piccadilly Circus in London. And I'm like rushing to get to the theater because I want to get there early because I've written my little note to Henry Fonda saying, any given Wednesday, or whatever, just because I wanted to meet him. And I'm running now through Piccadilly Circus to get there early so you can go to the stage door. And I can't find the theater. And I start asking directions. And no one spoke English. I'm in London. And nobody spoke. I'm like, please, sir, I'm terrible. Nevertheless, I get there and I get to the stage door and I drop my note off for Mr. Fonda and I rush in. I get into the theater. I have great seats and I adore the play. But I know that now if I want to go see him afterwards, go up to his dressing room or meet him, I've got to run and go out and around and get to the alley. And I jump up and I run all the way around. I make it to the stage door and I say, and I'm like 15. And I say, hi, yes, I sent a note to Mr. Fonda for the performance. And they're like, oh, yeah, stand back, help me out. And I'm like, but, and they're, no, wait, girl, right? And now, time is going by, and tons of people are piling up behind me because they want an autograph and and this and all this stuff, and billions of people, and I'm right on the precipice of the door. And finally, Henry Fonda comes out, and he has my note. And I go, that's my note. And he says, oh, I was waiting for you to come backstage. And I went, those men wouldn't let me. And he goes, now, fellas, you should always let a pretty girl. He signed my program and but I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to talk to him about acting in movies and film and stories and the things he had done, and I'm like, okay, sure, thank you. And it's a lovely anecdote, but the long story is I started out as a theater person. Mm. And I wanted out of Clearwater, Florida, and I spent a summer studying theater at Northwestern, which has a high school program they called us cherubs, because we were teens, and did theater there. And, I just was like, my mom was awesome. And I had these wonderful experiences that got me out of Clearwater, Florida, to be exposed to different things that I wanted and that I was passionate about. So I actually wound up at Northwestern University because they would let me, I think I had auditioned at some theater schools that were just acting one, dance one, sword fighting one, acting two, dance one, sword fighting, stage fighting two, etc. And I wanted to study more than one thing. And Northwestern was sort of willing to let me do that. And so I got a theater degree and a really cool, it's a long actual phrase, but for what the degree was, but essentially a psychology degree through a program called Human Development and Social Policy, HumDev Soc Pol. Very catchy. And oddly enough, both of those things became very formative in my life. So this is why I'm trying to get back to my life story is it's interesting because you see that these choices that you make that seem right in the moment or random actually sort of ultimately came together for my path. And I got through Northwestern, with a lot of nose to the grindstone to do 2 degrees. And people would say, theater and psychology, what are you going to do when you graduate? And
Sounds like a writer to me.
Yes. And I got tired of having to defend that. My parents were psychologists. I saw a lot of value. And in any field to take that background into. And I started saying, well, I'll be certified to act nuts. Because I just didn't feel like I should have to defend studying things that I was interested in, a story and human behavior. And I got tired of it, and so I'm certified to act nuts, and people would leave me. I'll go, ha, ha, ha. We could move on, right? Instead of having to defend my life choices. So I'm sitting, I wonder if it's appropriate to use her name. So I'm sitting in the office of the Associate Dean of the School of Speech. And I have of all of this courses in 4.5 years, I have 2 that have the potential to count in both. One was play therapy, right? Mm-hmm. And one were dance therapy or something, I don't know. And all these courses. And so I'm sitting in her office and she's like, so Barri, when, theater and psychology, when you graduate, what do you intend to do to that? And I said, well, I'll be on play therapy. I think I'd find play therapy very meaningful. But because this was a build your own Sunday psychology, I call it a psychology degree because it's easier than saying human development and social policy. It actually was a brilliant thing for me because I studied teaching. I taught drama in the schools to first graders. I learned how to make lesson plans, never dreaming that I would become a teacher. I mean, my first gig was as a paid teacher was the UCLA graduate producer program. And I knew how to make lesson plans, but I took that, and studied that because I was getting this cool build your own Sunday major that allowed me to study all these different things I was interested in. And it was in the School of Education. And that's kind of, interesting. And then as I studied theater, I studied acting with a lot of people who went on to be successful. And I studied directing. And I realized I became much more interested in the idea of not waiting to be chosen, but choosing the story. Mm-hmm. And that's what mattered. And then I went, well, and I was directing stuff and I went, I thought, well, I'll go to New York. And I'm like, I grew up in Colorado, Florida. How am I going to get along in New York City? And then I went, if I'm going to work really hard to tell a story, I really want a lot of people to hear it. And is theater the venue that is right for that? And will I have, will I choose a story that's really important to me to tell, and not only will enough people hear it, but will I be limited by the proscenium arch, which I had been using as a kid with my siblings? Will I be limited by that and the kinds of stories that I want to tell? And I was like, I want to do film. And I went, well, I'll have a theater degree. Nobody's going to touch me in film. It'll be this terrible albatross hanging around my neck, and I was passionate about it. And certainly I learned about story, but I was studying Greek theater. I had an opportunity that was afforded me by a producer later in my career and to travel to Athens. And I was taken by a tour guide to see the theater of Dionysus, and I wept because I've been studying the ancient Greek theater since I was a teenager.
Right.
But I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do? And I actually, maybe it's too much information, but so I come home from Northwestern. I have 2 degrees simultaneously. I studied a lot, but things I loved. When you study things you love, once I got past like a geography course and some requirements, it's not studying. I mean, It is, but it's not. So my mother says, wow, my parents both had advanced degrees. And my mother says, well, Barry, 2 degrees and no marketable skills, and you want to move to Los Angeles and pursue film. So I think that you need to either become a dental hygienist or go to bartending school. I signed up for bartending school so fast. And I'll let you know that I graduated at the top of my class in both the speed and written tests and can discuss at length the difference between cognac and brandy. And I moved to Los Angeles and I could tend bar. And that actually helped launch my career. I swear to God.
Hey, you and Bruce Willis, right?
How did you get there?
No, that's great.
No, he was a bartender?
Yeah, Bruce Willis is a bartender. So,
oh my God,
you're in good company.
I did not know that. I love that. Okay, I'm telling you, no matter how hot Bruce Willis was, whatever, girls make so much money.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And, oh yeah, baby. I mean, honestly, fallback career, if I could go back to that. And I had so much fun. And I met so many people and I had adventures. So, and I'm tending bar at that point. And it left me free to try to pursue and get into film and, blah, blah, blah. But I found that, I was reading Variety and I could not get a job as like a runner that only required a light driver's license in the film business. So I'm attending bar in Westwood. And late at night, 2 guys walk in. 2 guys walk into a bar. And the bar is pretty empty. It's pretty late. And they're discussing a film they've just seen. And I'm like, I get them their drinks, but they're like having this very intense discussion about this film. And I'm like, easy enough. And I get into the conversation. And one of the guys says to me, oh, well, would you be interested in interning? And I work in post. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, sure. Give me your information. And I'll reach out to you and you can intern. And I ripped off a blank piece of registered tape and he writes his information down and draws a picture of a Riva splicer. This is the olden days.
Cut film.
Oh yeah, baby. File trims, all of them. And I interned and then it led to my first ever paycheck. And it was a really wonderful experience for me to see. When I ran Deborah Hill's company, Deborah said all the time, you make a film 3 times. When you write it, when you shoot it, and when you cut it.
Yep.
And I had that experience. The other guy in the bar wound up being a pretty big writer. He was with his UCLA college roommate, and he had said to him one day, so Mark, I have this idea for a script, and it's about in the future, it's about this cop who's a robot. I'm going to call it RoboCop, and Mark, the editor, goes, he's like, do you want to write it with me? And Mark is like, nah. So that's my 2 guys walk into a bar story. And it was really overall a wonderful experience for me. I always had cash, I always had dates, and I got all kinds of perks that might be even still now bad to speak about. But, so as I moved forward, I was asked to speak to some Northwestern alum, and I was sort of talking about how I had just happened to study education, and because I wanted to do this build your own Sunday major, which let me pick all of these different psychology, sociology, etc., things that I thought were cool, but I had to do that, and fine, and I loved doing first graders are glitch, and they'll imagine anything, but I didn't do it ever thinking that I would wind up being a teacher. I did it because I was like, ooh, I can study psychology of sex roles, and I can study, abnormal behavior, and I can study sociology, and I can pick as long as I can defend it. And then, relationships. One of my brothers reinvigorated, one of my dear younger brothers, Neil, reinvigorated what do you call it? Not the right word, chapter of the Sammy fraternity when he went to school at Tulane. And after college, he was not quite certain what his path was going to be. And he got to be a national field rep for Sammy. And it was a wonderful experience for him. And he is a fabulous person at everything he does. And because of that, he got to meet people in the national organization, including a graduate of the UCLA chapter, who was a lit agent. Gary Pearl, who is now a manager and a very successful producer. And Gary sort of took me under his wing and, said, you're going to need a coverage sample, so you better read this, and you're going to need this, and you're going to need that, and put me up for some gigs. And I eventually wound up working for him and a television agent, which was really hard job to work for two young agents at a time. And I learned a ton. And I read a ton. I worked a ton. And it was fantastic. And when it was time, this will circle back around. When it was time for me to move on, Gary was like, my champion. Mm-hmm. And a job came up at a company, and I really wanted it. And I had to slip out for the interview during the middle of the day, and I had two bosses. And I told my, right? So I told my girl boss that I had a girl problem, needed to go to the doctor for itchy. And I'm not a big lie. I do not. I'm a very honest person. Even my consultations say expect honesty. And I went to the interview, and I was very excited. It was for the very, very talented writer-producers, Bruce Evins and Ray Gideon, as a junior development executive or development associate or something. And I was just like, yes. And I thought, there's that theater degree. I was a little excited and rushing and not a liar. So, having done that, I was a little on edge. And they were in post. And that's where I had to go meet them. I guess I had been through the first interview. And that's where I had to go meet them. And I go to jump out of my car, and I have a knee-length skirt with a demure little slit. And I go, rip the slit way up high. And I'm like, suck it up. On with the show. Swirl the skirt around so the slit is in the back instead of, and go into, where they're into the room where they're on post on a project. And I know what the heck is going on. That's great. And keep my back to the wall. And they're like, so theater major. And I'm like, yes, but I've gone on, I had studied a lot at UCLA, extension, film and television, so sort of trying to get rid of this albatross. And they're like, that's exactly what we want. We've had a lot of success with hiring a playwright to do an adaptation of a small movie that was very dialogue driven. And we would really like someone to really know the New York theater scene and, either find a great playwright or a play to adapt. Voila. Again.
All comes together. Yeah.
Crazy. And when I began working for them, just a fabulous experience for me. And I had a lot of opportunity, and I got to know a lot of very talented New York-based writers, and I was instrumental in discovering the Wachowskis.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
And Ray and Bruce got the credit on their first film, Assassins. Not I, but I got that one rolling. It was a huge and wonderful and special learning experience. And they promoted me to story editor. And that was like the best promotion of my entire life. Because I was so moved and so honored. But, oh my God, did I work hard.
Yeah.
I was a junior development executive, and the woman I worked for, I learned, Lisa Fitzgerald, I learned a lot from her, but we were going through 40 scripts a week. Were coming through our office. And I had really believed in interns and internships. And so I would work at the office until at least 9 on a Friday night because this was ancient times when scripts were on paper. And it was the most transformative learning experience for me in so many ways. I thought this is 9 o'clock on a Friday night, which is fine, but then I'm going to go and work all weekend and read until my eyes fall out of my head. And so I started an internship program. And I had these fabulous interns who have grown up to be fabulous people and professionals and people I'm delighted to have in my life. But for me, I really like the two-way street. So I wanted to create an internship program where people learned, where people developed important, significant skills to break them into the industry. They learned coverage, they sat in on meetings, they learned to take notes, etc., and built skills. And that, ultimately, I had a lot of people from UCLA, and that ultimately led to my teaching career. So I don't know if this kind of gives you the sense that I just sort of kept pursuing things that I was interested in and living life in a way that felt right and my passions. And it just sort of, there just kept being a convergence.
Yeah, it's just synergy did all the things.
It took me like this long time to go, oh, now that I look back on it, I just kept saying, look, I would fight for that opportunity. I'd fight to be able to, do double majors and things like that. But it was like, I want to do and learn and pursue my passions. So just to tie me being 15 into later in life, so I go to interview with Deborah Hill to be president of production. And of course, to me, discussing projects is like blind dating. It's like how you express, or first date or whatever. It's how you express who you are. I like long walks on the beach and dark character-driven thrillers, and and so we're talking stories. And she's got, and I have this Clarence Darrow project, and I'm like, she's like,
it's amazing.
And I'm like, Since I was in third grade, and then this, you're telling me like you're just a few projects, and I'm like, yes. She was working on a film version of Sea Hunt, and the initial adaptation was by Peter Benchley, and I had read Jaws as a child, and I had seen it, in the middle of the night, scared to go into the bathroom afterwards. Literally, I mean, grew up in a small beach community, people, and I'm like, oh my God, I mean, so, right?
That's amazing.
This is, to me, it's at the heart of how things work.
As long as you keep moving yourself forward, all the pieces of your life come together, right? And then it all makes sense.
in two fronts, in terms of pursuing your passions and being true to who you are. And a little luck. Who knew those two guys would walk into a bar? But it's, and I think I've written about this in some of my columns and blogs, you also have to be prepared. You also have to have done the work so that when you have that moment, you're like, why, yes, I'm ready to meet it when you have that.
I like to tell people it's a lifetime of work to become an overnight success.
Yes.
Yeah.
Third grade, Clarence Darrow. And here we're like, bonding over it, decades later. And I'm ecstatic, that, I mean, we did not get that project made, but we had it packaged with Ron Howard and Frank Pearson. Some marvelous opportunities that I had with the late Deborah Hill. A lot of opportunity to champion things that I was interested in.
Yeah.
And even to take a leave and go produce an independent feature-length comic doc. I remember having an equipment problem. I was able to get everything. I kind of Pied Pipered this project because of its concept, and I was able to get the camera package was the last one of this particular HD camera that Sony promoted by giving away and sent a famous DP to train us, and got me, I negotiated reading scripts for the guy who ran a company that sold the special tapes, and had a travel cross country interviewing famous people and ordinary people. It was really an amazing experience, but we had a camera glitch early on. And I'm on the phone with Deborah, and I'm like, nobody can tell. I mean, I worked my way up as a dogged girl producer all the way up to the head of Sony's tech department. And we can't tell if the pixelation we're seeing on the frame is just that we're only in playback, or if it's on the tape. And I'm going nuts, and the nearest equipment is 400 miles away, and and I've done everything to make this happen, and then I'm in the thick of the shoot, and I'm like, I'm talking to Deborah, and I'm like, and I got all the way, troubleshooting, girl producer, fight the problem, make it work. Fashion took ahead of Sony, and they're trying to find somewhere where we can watch my DP can watch the footage, and it was this is the cutting edge technology. Almost nobody was and he finally says, "You crossed finger." It was okay, but it was it was harrowing, and I'm like, Deborah, and if I only had more money and I could this and that, and she's like, no. You, as a producer, no matter what budget you have, you're going to have problems that you're going to have to solve, and I saw her, with her on sets and things like that. And the AC wasn't working.
Just make it work. So Barri,
I didn't work in the clown thing either, but I did tie in.
No, that's great.
Grade and high school and college.
You hit all the time periods, but so this question has come to mind because, okay, so you came from this theater background, obviously, and academic. What was the learning curve like going up and learning how the heck to be a producer and getting into this? Because you said, you started out, they just called you in, like, come work as an assistant on. What was that like, learning the steps of each of those jobs within a film?
Well, I mean, I had started as an assistant at a boutique lit agency.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Gary Pearl was a wonderful mentor to me. And I had one agent who was film and one agent who was television. And, like the TV agent could give me 2 pilots and say, which do you think will succeed? And I picked the wrong one. I mean, just right. I mean, okay. And you can't, every audience is fickle. And the other one was very, very successful. But Gary said, you want to be in development. You don't have to like everything. You need to learn to define your own taste. Mm. And that's, so there's that. And of course, there are the in-between parties. I did study a lot of film and television, and because I went to school while I probably tended bar and did other things and interned and things like that. I went to UCLA Extension, and I studied a lot of, got that part that was missing when I understood that I needed to, have film. But then to get that job, because I had the theater background after buffing up on, but, and then, being an assistant just was an incredible learning curve because you understand who all the players are. And, being an agent is a lot about information gathering, who wants what, where, when. And it was just a fabulous learning curve. And I studied. I was like, I don't know anything. I don't know where Warner Brothers is geographically, darn it, I mean, I wanted to learn everything. And I wanted to meet people because I wanted to meet people. And I the first person, somebody said, well, you should know this other assistant because she's going to be amazing and you'll need to know her. And I'm like, okay. And so I went out with her. And I was like, oh, I don't fit. I'm like, this is like, I'm like, not like, hey, who cool. Like, maybe I'm not going to be hanging with the cool kids in high school. And then I realized that there was tons of people that I would fit with. I just had to find them. But that kind of what made me go, oh. It was like my first little networking thing. And I went, whoa. And then it was like, I realized that I was finding the people who were my crew, who were passionate about getting stories told and were smart and funny. And so I'm on the phone all the time, sending all these breakfast, lunches, and dinners, and drinks, and client meetings, and And every time I talked to somebody who I thought was smart and funny, I wrote it down and put it on a little scrap of paper. And the partners in the agency, fabulous partners. Bernie Weintraub and Steve Robinson would have, tickets for a premiere or this or that or whatever, and there would be screenings or somebody, the other agents, and they would hand them down. And then you had a +1. And I would go to my little stack of pages of people who I thought were smart and funny and say, hey, want to come? And then I started to meet even more people to find those smart, funny, interesting people who were passionate about the things I'm passionate about. So I started, good Lord, I started doing assistant parties before they were quite au courant. And I said to all the people that I had been meeting and were on my list, so you can come but you're an assistant in an agency. I want you to bring an assistant in the studio or development side that you think is really cool, and vice versa. So I didn't want to just meet people in my circle. I wanted to expand my circle.
Right. That's really smart.
And so, you know, your plus one has to be somebody who does something different than you do. And that was, you know, wonderful and amazing. I kind of almost forgot about that. And then I thought, you know, I was so nose to the grindstone. I had a boyfriend at the time who was laughing at me because I would go to see him on Friday night, and I'm like, no, I have to eat soft food. And he's like, what? I'm like, no, I can't do the cut or I'm tired, so tired, you know, because I'm working. I've been working 7 days for, you know, and you have to throw yourself into it. No matter, when I was a development associate, no matter how many scripts I read during the week, when we got down to doing the weekend read, I had 10. My boss used to make stacks. There's a part of me that misses the paper, not the brads, because those I have injuries, but the paper, because you had the stacks. And, you know, when I was working for an agent and people would call and say, when is she going to get to my script? And I go, hold on a second. I go, here, you've got a foot and a half down in the stack. But there would be stacks in front of Lisa's desk, like high priority, it's specs, we got to read it. And, you know, it's a sample for a project, you know, stacks in order of priority. I'm like, oh, she doesn't know this. But I thought it's like 10 plus scripts every single weekend for the Monday morning meeting. And I'd be like, I know which one she's going to give me. And I would go into her office, and it wasn't there, and I would pull them out from underneath the stack and read them and stick them back in. And I would still wind up with 10 I hadn't read on top of it. She doesn't know that. But then that was like fabulous, even though my eyeballs were falling out, because we would sit on her couch on Monday morning, and I would have to discuss everything I had read that weekend and pitch it to her. And so this is like great, right? And so I'm saying, I cannot handle someone yawning when I am talking about a story. What am I doing wrong? And I learned how to pitch. I understood it's about the bottom line. Here's what it is. Here's who it's for. Here's why you need to read it, or why you don't bother. Boom. You know, so that, like, because I couldn't bear the idea of someone yawning while I was telling a story, I learned how to pitch. And nobody was teaching that then. And much less the way you would pitch in a business executive situation. Here's what it is. Here's what it is. It's this, and it's from so-and-so because that matters. Here's what it is, and here's why you don't need to read it, or why you ought to read it. You ought to read it for this open writing assignment. You ought to read it because this is a writer we want to know. You know, you ought to read it. Don't bother. I got it. Look at the coverage, move on. And because I couldn't bear that, I built those skills, and then I started teaching those skills, and I taught them to all my interns, and I taught it as part of the first USA graduate producer course that I taught. And I ultimately was like a pitch doctor in conferences. As I couldn't stand, you know, I couldn't tolerate that. I love story, and I want them to be, you know, so cool story about a story. So when I was given the opportunity to teach at UCLA, because I had been doing this amazing job teaching my interns, there were lessons and reading and handouts and, you know, stuff like that. I just got better and better and bigger and bigger about teaching and building these entry-level skills. Because it's like, I want you to do a lot of junk for me, but I want a two-way street, which is core to who I am. So I want you to do a lot of stuff because I got to like move 40-something scripts through the office this week physically, like just making the thank you, no thank you letters and just labels and just pushing them in the envelopes. And, right? I want you to do the dumb stuff. But I want you to feel like you grew and you learned and you had opportunities.
Right.
And so that's why the person who was sending me all the stuff, the UCLA interns who were coming back, would have all this learning and real world stuff. Real world matters to me. They said, would you, come teach this? So I said, I've taught a lot of stuff and love teaching. This course was called From Ideas to Movies, and it followed the whole path. And each, the latter part of each class was a panel of pro-writers, and then the panel that included some of their agents, and it sort of traveled along that path. We had Lindsay Duran on the day she was promoted to president, which is pretty amazing. I'm like, yeah, here you go. I usually give people a bottle of water. Lindsay, your phone sheet must look like a gigantic, telephone book. Here's a bottle of champagne. She came that day. But the final day, so I've got producers and I've got screenwriters, and I'm trying to teach all these skills. And then the first time you teach any subject is challenging because it has to fit the slot. And I was running a production company in Santa Monica and never leaving my office before 7 at night under any circumstances, and then to go to a drinks or indoor screening. And I had to be at UCLA in Westwood at 7, and I'm like screaming there and running into the classroom so that I would not be late for my own class. But it was so I'm trying to teach all these fundamental skills, and I'm trying to bring in all these great speakers and coordinate with them, and here's where to go and here's where to park and here and there, and have this continuity through line where you have a writer talking about what their point of view is, and then their agent talking about their point of view, and then the development executive talking about their point of view, and then the studio executive talking about their point of view, and right. It was cool. I enjoyed it. And but one of the things I wanted people to learn was the lesson from Lisa Fitzgerald, pitching. And ideas. I'm like, it's this big ideaholic. And oh my God, I've talked a long time. So the final was called, was about, we had been developing pitches over the course, whether you're a producer or a writer. I had both. I would make a little time in each thing and have people get up and pitch, and I would, go, okay, but, how about this? How about that? And I did, the final night was all pitching. I had 2 panels of pros, an agent, a studio executive, and development executive. And because I had to give them a break, it was 3 hours, right? And everybody came up and pitched. And the next morning, I got a phone call. It's like, hey, Barry, it's Danny. Like, hey, Danny. He says, I'm sure you know why I'm calling. This is one of the agents. And I said, I'm sure I do, but why don't you tell me? Because I had heard 30-something pitches. And I'm like, of course, but you tell me. You go. And he goes, what's that one? He says, that one's a movie, and I know how to get it. And I go, yeah, I love that concept. And I only got a little time to try to develop it out. And I'm like, but who are the characters? There was a conflict. This is cool. There's something cool here. But and the guy was an aspiring producer, so it was a little more challenging for him to have those jobs. So he's like, I know how to make that. I know how to get that set up. And you and Deborah should make it. You and Deborah got to do it. So I'm like, well, all right. I agree with you. There's a great concept there, but it doesn't have the meat. And he says, well, we should talk to Denver. So I'm like, okay. So I go in and I pitch. This is 2 paragraphs, barely. And I go, so, hey, Deborah, here's this thing. And, I really did groove on this one. The guy really genuinely talked about it, And I go, but trust me, it's a movie. She's like, what are the characters? where's the conflict? And I'm like, well, yes, I know that, but there's this hook here. And I'm like, it's a movie. And she goes, prove it. And I said, fine. And I marched back into my office, and I had this brilliant junior development executive working with me who was a structure savant. And I'm like the character because of the psychology degree and all that, and I'm like the character and he's like the structure. And we turned it into 10.5 pages and sold it preemptively with the original guy attached to go produce to Warner's for low 6 and 4 hours, for 4.5 hours.
What was it? Can you talk like?
I didn't get paid. For a million reasons, because this is development hell. But it was. Let's see if I can pitch it. It was a dark, character-driven thriller in the vein of Seven, about a detective who comes to realize that the cases that he's catching are the work of a serial killer. That the original working title is terrible. But that what's happening is that dead bodies are showing up in impossible places. Like in a bank vault when it's open in the morning. And there's not one stitch, there's no clue as to who their identity is. They match no missing persons reports, no fingerprints, no dental records, no, and there's nothing they're naked, there's nothing to identify them. And he comes to realize that they're the work of a serial killer in the future who's burying his bodies in the past.
Why did that never get made? That sounds awesome.
The hook was, where's the perfect place to bury a dead body in the past? So these victims are the ultimate John Does. The title we sold it under, instead of naked bloody killers or something, or naked bloody bodies or something, naked bodies, some working title we were using, became Meet John Doe, because they were the ultimate John Does. And it was, slam dunks never work. I've slam dunked several times in my career, and slam dunks won't work. They just, it's the great tragedy. You have like the thrill and the ecstasy and yes, I told you it was a movie, and only for something to implode in badly in development.
There's so many places for it to go wrong, right? Like,
yeah, lots of little snags along the way. So
being a producer is about trying to keep pushing the boulder up the hill, making it work.
Right.
So now you taught this at UCLA, and since then, I know you've sort of incorporated some of these ideas into your own teaching and pedagogy. Can you talk a little bit about the class that you currently run?
Rather than my clown name? Yes. From the UCLA class, because this is how things just like, I don't know, they're like a spider web, right? From that UCLA class, I had wound up being a mentor at the really fantastic nonprofit screenwriting contest, Cinema Story. I'm working at the retreats, and they wanted to offer a summer program in Idlewild. And the head of Cinema Story came to me and she said, do you want to do a screenwriter summer camp? I'm like, ooh, fun. And I'm going to give 4 days to these amazing people, and I'd like to give you 3. And you can teach anything you want. Mm-hmm. And I knew that it was ideas, because that was, where everything in the first course started. And I wished I'd had all this time to like make that guy's story so that I didn't have to go out and prove it, enable him to make it full and rich. I know that just, where's the character? They didn't prove it. And I'm like, but they would have those stickos. So I started teaching the BigBigIdeas seminar. And then when COVID happened, I used to teach it all over the country, and I was asked back. I taught in Boston 3 times, and in Richmond 5 times, and in Chicago, and in Cleveland, and, all over the country. And it was great because I was in a room, and it was intimate. It was intensive. I never let you out of the room. I put food in and everything. And, it was we ate together, we talked together, we watched movies together. It was real intensive. And it was fabulous. And of course, it was a huge growth experience for me because as a teacher, because when you can see people's eyes and you're talking about an abstract concept, like person, and not everybody goes, up, you go, okay, I have to be a better teacher. I have to find more ways to discuss this. I have to find more examples. I have to find more parallels. I have to find more things that like spark everybody. So everybody goes.
Right. Has that aha moment.
Yeah. And I mean, I've taught at like studios and, it was like at DreamWorks, there's like 100 people in auditorium, but once you've had that fabulous opportunity, you're just a better teacher. I can see all the people's eyes at DreamWorks or Pixar or something, or Blizzard when I'm in this huge auditorium. And I had all that wonderful one-on-one, but I couldn't figure out a way to recreate that experience in a Zoom of Saturday night, Saturday day, Friday night, Saturday day, Saturday night, Sunday. And the interpersonal and the interactive, and I couldn't figure out. And I thought, well, what else do I want to do? Well, I want to teach the kinds of things that I write about in my Scriptman column and my blog, and in a book that I'm working on called Creating Delicious Stories, which starts with connectors, the amuse-bouche of story. And I'm like, these are the things, and I was like Blizzard, there were people who wanted me to begin to talk more instead of like pitching, because I started as about the elevated topics. Like at Blizzard wanted to move and into film, and Pixar, DreamWorks wanted ideas generated in-house, etc. The good folks at Blizzard had, invited me to the campus, which mirrors their date, mirrors the Pixar date. It's an homage. It's really I know that. I got it. They have a ginormous bronze sculpture in the middle with their and they come with blowtorches from China to keep it from going green every year, with these plaques embedded around it about their founding principles. And one is embrace your inner geek. I'm telling too long a story. My inner geek is interested in the neuroscience of story. So this was an opportunity for me to incorporate these advanced skills that I work with and with my consultation clients that I refined in all those years as an executive trying to get that script to the next level. It's about the next level. It's called screenwriting elevated. So the things that I'm not going to talk cut to and format. Go ask Dr. Format. What are all those fundamental things. Right. It's about how you elevate writing and storytelling. And we know how I love the storytelling,
Right.
So it's about elevated topics, and it spans 7 months. And it has, I don't want to sound arrogant, but it's the stuff they're not teaching. Subtext. What does that mean? How does that work? How do you create a visceral experience on the page for the reader without telling the actor, the director what to do? How do you move us with your words? Mm-hmm. It's these elevated thinking, this elevated thinking. And that is, subtext is neuroscience, baby. So it's not too bad of an aside. And it's about developing these upper level skills. And it's about finding your voice as a writer through the lectures, through reading, through exclusive handouts, through writing workouts and assignment and one-on-one mentorship time with me, and through reading great scripts that I, would pick and assign And then I went, oh, it'd be kind of cool. How about if some of those screenwriters came and chatted? And so I added the guest speakers partway through. And I had all these amazing A-list writers come in and like chat. Like, wait, hey, did everyone get their questions asked? I found out some of them were staying on so long, not just because they were lovely people enjoying the discussion, but because they were supposed to write and were trying to, have a good excuse not to.
Procrastination, everybody has it.
I have a reasonable purpose in not writing. And we're staying really long and really enjoying the discussion. And we had read their scripts and watched clips or read stuff out loud to her. It's just, different things among the tremendous amount of reading, because I believe that to develop your writer is the uber goal. You need to be exposed to a lot of good writing. I was also exposed over my career to a lot of crap writing, and you learn from that as well. But it's about having that rich diet of voices. And I had writers who I knew that was part of their backstory, is emulating voices till they discovered theirs. So that's fantastic. I'm crazy about this course. It's very intimate. I am letting in 10 people. I have 2 scholarships, one a work study and one a needs-based, to acknowledge the times we've been through and to enable people to keep being creative. I think one is probably about to go away. But we have the first session had people all across the United States, Barbados, into Great Britain. And you don't just get to go, somebody goes, put it on Eventbrite. And I'm like, I want to talk to the people, because you want to be selective about who you let into it. Yeah. I want it to be the good vibe. And I feel like at this time in human history, we need that connection. And so I started opening the Zoom up a half hour early without recording, and people could come in with their coffee or tea, and this is the time of day, and discuss what they'd read, or just hang out, or how's this going, and because I wanted there to be in the room, and for people to feel like they had a tribe. And so I wanted to be, I didn't want to talk about fade out and cut to and, what to capitalize and what to bold and da-da-da, but I wanted to talk about subtext, tension, suspense, beyond fundamentals, the things that make story delicious. You don't want to teach typing. You want to teach storytelling. I'm not going to discuss what screenwriting program you should want. I want to talk about storytelling and figuring out who you are and what stories you should tell and why.
Well, and I imagine that opens it up to discussing like the universality of stories. I mean, why do we still love Shakespeare hundreds of years later? Because he's just talking about the human condition, and that doesn't really change. Yeah.
So it's been a huge pleasure to me. I mean, I was nervous. I had never done Zoom. I'm like, I did a test run. I'm like, now I got to try to share my screen to show you. And I'm like, what? I got to get a camera. I gotta, put on some hair and makeup when I'm living and, fuzzy slippers and yoga pants. You work that into the lecture. You go subtext, it's beneath the text. Yeah. Like, the table, I got fuzzy slippers and yoga pants on. That's right. It was just fabulous. It was wonderful. I still get a little nervous with them, but share screens. But I had, some my idols come and speak, and just a range of voices, and I feel like people got all the things out of it I wanted. That's great.
Now, how many times have you had the opportunity to do this Zoom class now?
I am about to start the second session beginning April 24th. It will be the 4th Saturdays for 7 months. You will be building a lot of muscle. I mean, it's you get in what you put out, but when you get out what you put in.
Right.
Just articulate.
I think it works both ways.
Yeah.
I put a hell of a lot into it, let me tell you. There's a lot of very exclusive reading and fabulous articles or clips of interesting discussions. There's a lot of supplemental material to digest over the course, in addition to scripts over the course of the intervening month. So yes, that threw me off a bit. Sorry.
No worries. So this is coming up really soon, though. So if people are interested and they want to be looked at as a potential student, because you did say that you want to chat with everybody before you approve them, how do they contact you about this class?
Well, you can contact me. It's at Barri, BARRI, at BigBigIdeas.com. You can also find information there on the...
That's two bigs, to be clear. That wasn't a stutter.
Yes,
Two bigs.
it's not a stutter. It's BigBigIdeas.com.
Yeah.
And you can find out more information on the seminar page, testimonials, and a few hints as to who our former past speakers have been, although I do not intend to trade on the names of the big A-list people who were most generous with their time. And testimonials and more information. And I'm kind of just, I think it's coming together, but I want to recreate that magic that people walked away with, where writers were going, I'm having a conversation with this guy who defined this genre, or this woman who did this, and they're just like, hey, yeah, well, for me, and what else do you want to know? What do you want to talk about? That's kind of cool. Yeah, oh my God, that was cool, we tried to have a genre defining scripts, very distinctive voices, women's voices, first scripts that launched prestigious careers. Really just a rich diet of reading that led to this awesome amount of writers who were hung out with us. And I feel good because, some of them made my little heart pound myself. But, I feel like I created the magical experience that I was aiming for, between one-on-one mentorship and the community and the speakers and the lectures and the extras, all I just wanted it to be everything, not where you just watch a video. I wanted it to be everything. So I hope I recreate it.
Barri, I think you will. And here's the reason why. Because, I met you on Clubhouse and I immediately connected with you. There was just something, you have such an open, and wonderful
clown in me. It's
Whitney's an educator too. So we're here.
Yeah, we connected on a lot of levels just immediately. And here's the thing, Barri, I actually do really deep dives on people whenever I'm planning on working with them. And so I started, investigating you. And I have to say, everyone that I talked with sung your praises. They said, she's amazing, she knows her shit, and magic happens whenever you work with Barri. She just, no, I'm not even kidding. I had so many people just say that. Really? Yeah, you guys can't see Barri's face right now, but she's getting a little choked up. Every person that I asked about you had nothing but good things to say about you. And they were like, Whitney, if you have the opportunity to work with her, do it, no uncertain terms. So audience members, I'm telling you, if you are listening to this and you are like, you know what, this sounds interesting to me, I'm a writer, or I'm a secret writer, or I am a screenwriter already, I encourage you to reach out to Barri, because you don't have stuff like that happen where every person that you talk to says, no, this person, it recreates and has magic in them. So if you get to work with somebody who's magical, fucking do it, guys. And you know me, like, you've listened to this podcast a lot. I don't get emotional about people. I'm getting emotional about Barri because there's something really cool about this woman, guys. So reach out to her if you're connecting on this and create with her, because I think that it would be worth it.
Wow. I've been podcasting with Whitney for almost 5 years now, and I've never seen her get that emotional about a guest ever.
You're all me weepy.
Whitney's usually very cool on the podcast. She's the teacher. She doesn't like give a lot away. It's about the guest. It's not about her. She very rarely likes to even talk in the podcast. That was something else. I'm in freaking awe right now. Like, I've never seen her like jump on board like that before. That was amazing.
No, I mean, like I said, I connected with Barri beforehand, and then whenever I started, like, investigating, I've just never seen anybody get reactions the way people react to you, Barri. Like, everybody
That's amazing.
Everyone's in awe of you, and that makes me even more in awe of you. Like, holy shit, this woman is so legit. And I don't know, like, when you get people like that in a room, that's when wonderful, like, the universe just opens up and things happen. And
I feel like I should sign up for your class now.
I feel like you're that person.
We can talk. I mean, I haven't been asked to like go like back to, I was a little girl in a boring town in Florida and work my way through like you guys did with me. But
yeah.
Do you see that? This is what fascinates me about story, essentially, that how this happened to be a synthesis of so many life experiences for me.
Well, that's why I like my podcast, Barri, because we ask that story. We want to talk about people's journeys to where they're at in these arts, right? Because for me, that connecting of the dots, all these disparate things that happen in a person's life are the fundamental building blocks of this wildly interesting life story that is you, right? Like, and until somebody forces your ass to sit down and think about it, most people don't do that. They don't do the brain dive to see how everything interconnected and became this beautiful tapestry of art that is the person and the soul that is walking through the world, right? I love that about this show. I love that about this podcast. 8 years we've been doing this podcast now, almost 300 interviews, and I never cease to be amazed by the stories of our guests. Like, and we hear it all the time at the beginning of an interview. Person will ask, how long are we going to talk? Well, we're going to talk for at least 45 minutes, maybe an hour. Sometimes we go longer. And I'd say 80% of the people who ask that question then follow up our answer with, oh, I don't know if I got that much to talk about. I'm not that interesting a person. And I tell everybody, you are way more interesting than you give yourself credit for or have bothered to realize. Because we all have these amazing journeys that we take that seem so random and just kind of their paths that go where they go during the moment. But when you look back, they're this beautiful weave tapestry of who you are. And I think it's incredible.
Well, and everybody else's stories become part of that. Barri and I were having a conversation about sub-characters and, the fact that, yeah, they're all reflections of that main character's arc. And that's true in people's lives too.
Yep.
David, I want to add something. I mean, I had the opportunity. I was asked to speak by a former Northwestern acting professor of mine. See, and I started in acting and I didn't realize initially, this is not where I am supposed to be, right?
Right.
That was what I knew when I started out of performing arts summer camp as a preteen, nobody was producing summer camp. And that's an idea, and I named it first. And he asked me would I sit down with a group of Northwestern interns, and very casually. And it was a small group, and they were women. I really wanted them to feel empowered. And And I guess because I had this basis of being in an acting class with him, sucking, and him making it very painful that I sucked, I think, probably. I'm like, wow, at the moment, that was such a horrible, shitty experience for me. And you're trying to make me cry in the Shakespeare scene, and you're being really shitty to me. But I'm like, wow, now I have this perspective as a grown-up, And I'm like, thank God.
Mm.
I would never have been a happy person if I had to wait to be chosen instead of choosing the stories. But it was in that discussion that I went, oh, and I had to say, I wanted to study all these different things. And so I did this weird major, human development and social policy, which actually came really into play when I founded a children's literacy nonprofit, because I had a background in social policy. And I'm like, I didn't think I'm going to found a children's literacy nonprofit. And that only came out of my feeling that I had done these networking parties that I mentioned to you as an assistant. And then as I got to an upper, an executive level, I thought, I'm so pissed that there's an old boys club and that people are going off playing poker and smoking cigars and going on whitewater rafting trips. And I'm reading about the deals they made about Variety. So I am starting my thing with women. And I started getting all these women together, and they were so smart and talented and passionate and wonderful, because I'm like, I need my chicks. I need my gals.
Great.
And the children's literacy profit, 25 years, came out of those amazing women.
That's awesome.
But, I wanted to be able to. So, but here's the synthesis. It's the same thing I try. I believe firmly that the single most, you make a trillion million decisions as a writer, but the single most important decision you will ever make is what to write next.
Mm.
And my method of helping people find that, which will some way find its way to recreate a magic in this flat world, is about finding that hooky idea, like me, John Doe, that is the intersection of your strengths and your passions. That triangulation, I can point it out to you in Rocky and all these sort of breakthrough scripts, and the stuff that you read about writers who wrote Little Miss Sunshine in 3 days and then did 100 drafts, and where they were at and how that impacted them. Your strengths and your passions and that big idea. I just kept pursuing those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in a way, is a mirror for this magic triangle, I just kept pursuing those opportunities, those things, and learning about what I wanted to learn about, not going, well, it's not like being a lawyer and you're pre-law and you're, taking the LSATs and you're in law school and you're clerking and interning and path. It's not like that.
Yeah.
But I think this may be the first time, so I thank you, that I have seen that this thing that I've been teaching for a really long time about how to find the intersection between what matters to you as a human being that you want to say about the human condition, your passions, your strengths. We're going to showcase your assets, right? And not something that relies on your weaknesses, but you showcase your strengths and the big hooky idea that there's a life metaphor for it. So, you made me weepy again, which is really rare. And I'm about to get on a call discussing possibly doing an R-rated horror comedy. That I'm crazy passionate about producing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how to say thank you enough. I had a lovely time.
I did as well. This was a great interview. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm going to be joining us.
I'm excited as well. It's going to be great. So just a reminder to everyone, please check out Big Big Ideas, Barri Evins. If this speaks to you, sign up for the class. And Barri, thank you so much. This is great.
Yeah, thank you, Barri.
Hello there, citizens. I am the terror that flaps in the night. I am the floaty that will not flush no matter how many times you try in the toilet bowl of crime. I am Darkwing Duck, telling you please, talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. Whatever the heck that means. After all, you are watching Intellectual Podcast with your ears.